crime, they got captured by the government. And they will be put inside of a prison as a form of consequence for breaking the law that has been established by their own government. Because of this, some of their rights are taken away from them. For instance, they will not be able to interact freely with other parts of society as they were before they commit the crime. Most of their freedoms are taken away because they have harmed other people's rights and their freedom is gone. But Team Proposition today, ladies and gentlemen, will tell you that even prisoners are still parts of society and therefore we cannot neglect their existence, and we've been doing so by forbidding them to vote in the national elections. We have excluded them from part of society, and therefore we would like to propose the solution that we will allow the prisoners to vote in national elections. And we're going to do that to two main arguments. First of all, I'm going to look at the importance of the vote itself, and that also includes to the prisoners that lives in the jail. And second, I'm going to explain why the benefit of allowing the prisoners to also participate in the vote itself. But before we move on to our points of substantive, let us define the motion that stands before us today. Now, the prisoners that we're going to allow to participate in the voting of national elections will be those who is at the legal age to vote. In several countries it's 18 and in several others it's 21 years old. And they're not a person who has received a death sentence penalty, and they have to prove that they're not being infected by any mental disorders. Having established the motions, now let's move on to our points of substantive. First of all, about the importance of the vote. Now, what is the vote, ladies and gentlemen? The vote is the moment where you can actually express your satisfactions and your critics towards the government by choosing or not choosing them to become the government that will lead you in the future. And therefore we say that is the fundamental right of every single person that lives inside of a state to be able to participate in the vote itself. Because it is the only places for you to be able to show your satisfaction towards the current government and the upcoming government itself. And because we think that it is fundamental, then it is not justifiable for us to take away all of their rights, even if they are a prisoner, even if they have committed a certain crime that has harmed another individuals. And we say, because it's fundamental, we cannot forbid them from taking and participate inside of the national election, and we cannot forbid them to vote itself. As it's so fundamental, and because by doing so, we have made them lose their voices and existence in the society and also in front of the government itself. We think that the prisoners have already received a punishment in exchange for that bad behavior that they have done in the past, and we think that taking some of their rights, forbidding them from interacting with other parts of society is already enough, and we think that we should not take away this fundamental right because they have received other forms of limitations and restrictions. And why do we think that it is wrong for them if they do not have the access to vote in national elections? Because we think that they will be, it'll be like you're excluding them from the parts of the society, whereas they will not be excluded from the parts of society when they have go out from the prison and even when they're still inside the jail itself. Why? Because every single of the rule that is going to be applied, every single of the policy that will be created by the government itself, current government or even the upcoming government, will directly affect this person in particular. Their rights will also be affected. They will be restricted in a way that the upcoming government has determined, and therefore we say that they will also gain all of the advantage and disadvantage of all the rules that will be applied in the future by the upcoming government itself. Now, by forbidding them to vote, we are not giving them access to determine their own future. We don't give them the chances to see what actually the policy that will be applied once the government is elected in the future itself. And thus we think that it's so unfair for them to not be able to determine their own future, where their life is actually at stakes, where they will be directly involved in the future itself. And moreover, ladies and gentlemen, we think that not all prisoners commit crimes because they are inherently evil. In fact, some of the prisoners are forced to commit crimes because of the conditions that they have faced. For example, poverty. The poor people are forced to steal other people's belongings because they were not able to afford all of their daily needs. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it shows to you that the government has failed to provide wealth to all of their society, which is the obligations of the government in all places. And we think because they have failed, they need to compensate these failures of them by allowing the prisoners to also participate in the voting in national election later on. And second layer of this argument is that we have seen the prisoners allowed to do many other things even before and after they enter the prison itself. They were able to comment and protest about the treatment that they received in the detention period. They were able to send critics to the government if they receive an inappropriate treatment coming from the police or the law enforcement. They were allowed to find a lawyer to defend themselves from all of the verdict that is going to be received by them during the trials period. Now, because we think that prisoners are allowed to defend themselves, they should also be allowed to defend their future, because their future are also included as themselves. If we allow them to defend themselves using the lawyers and critics all the inappropriate treatment that they will receive in the prison itself, then we say that they should also be able to access the vote in the national elections, as it is also will affect their daily life in the future itself directly. And therefore, we've demonstrated to you how it actually is very important for every single of the person, even if they're a prisoner, to also vote. And second argument is that the benefit of allowing all prisoners to vote. Because we think that the reason why most criminals commit crimes is that because they think that government ignores them. Because the moment the poor people steal other people's belongings, is because they do no longer trust government. It's because they think that the government do not listen to them anymore. And they think that the government ignores them so much. By not allowing them to vote, ladies and gentlemen, we will demonstrate that the government are in fact ignoring them. And therefore, they will angry. They will become more angrier and hate the government even more before they enter the jail itself. And it's going to make it harder for us to rehabilitate them, because they are no longer trust the government because they do not allow them to vote. But by allowing them to vote, ladies and gentlemen, we are making trust between the government and the prisoners itself, as they are allowed to also determine their rights and their destiny in the future itself. And therefore, when we allow them to vote, it will bring trust and create and gradually remove the hatred of the people inside of the jail itself. And for all those reasons, we think that is beneficial, and we are proud to propose.